Hello, and welcome again to another edition of Niger Innis Presents the Trump Revolution, a part of the TvAbraham network. Whereas we know, the world is anxiously awaiting the decision to engage or not engage Iran, the United States, that is, of course, under President Donald J. Trump. This comes within a larger context of a rise of anti-Semitism. I start with Iran because Iran is the epicenter of terrorism, at least state-sponsored terrorism, much of which is targeted towards Jews and the Jewish diaspora. And this comes at a time that there's a rise of anti-Semitism throughout the world, not just the Middle East, not just Iran, but even in the Western world. Well, we're blessed today to have on a tech influencer, dubbed Israel's top marketer, journalist, and social influencer. Hillel Fuld works with leading tech entrepreneurs, investors, and visionaries to accompany them on their journey from idea to revenue. Since the Hamas war on Israel began on October 7th, Hillel has been dedicated to utilizing his skills, team connections, and abilities to promote the positive message of Israel and the Jewish people and combating anti-Semitism through social engagement. Hello, I want to welcome you to the show, but
Thank you so
before,
much.
but before we really get started, I have to say a mild criticism, I'll call it a positive criticism. Your bio is way too modest.
Oh,
You have become from a tech entrepreneur to an activist, and you actually have been engaged in pro-Jewish activism for several years since you tragically lost your brother to an anti-Semitic killing, murder several years ago. That activism back then has led you all the way through your tech entrepreneurism to just 2 days before the horrific October 7th attack. You predicted that some calamity is going to hit the Jewish people, the Jewish diaspora throughout the West, 2 days before October 7th occurred. And you've not stopped since October 7th. And your activism has been so penetrating and profound that the politically correct elites in Australia revoked your visa after they had given you a visa to come make an appearance. They revoked it. Sir, you are quite the phenomenon, and we welcome you to the show today to discuss about some of these controversies and talk about the way forward for Israel and for the Jewish diaspora. Welcome to the
thank
show.
you for that, for those warm words. I really appreciate it. Humbled. Yeah, we're living in a crazy world that a person who speaks truth, is put on a pedestal. I don't know why everyone's not speaking truth, but I do my best.
You do a terrific job at that, and you are my brother Yankee. You were actually born in the United States, even though you now reside in Israel, and you've lived there for many years. But I believe you were born in Brooklyn.
Queens.
Queens, okay. Okay, well, I thought you were Dodgers, not a Met. But that's good. That's still a part of New York City. Well, please tell me about talk a little bit about the assassination of your brother several years ago, which I think started a domino effect of your activism.
Sure. So we're five brothers. Ari, my late brother Ari, was one above me in the lineup, and he was shopping for his family the day before Yom Kippur 8 years ago, and a nice Arab boy, and I say boy because he was a kid. He was a 15-year-old kid, not a Hamas terrorist. He wasn't oppressed. He wasn't occupied. He was living in Israel, living an affluent life. He lacked nothing. He woke up one day and said, "Today's a good day to murder a Jew." And my brother was shopping. He came from behind, like the cowards do, and stabbed him in the neck. He got lucky that day because he got my brother in a main artery in his neck. At which point Ari was clinically dead. Miraculously, though, Ari was able to chase him down, jump over a wall, and shoot the terrorist when he was just inches away from his next victim. He did not kill him, but he saved this woman's life in his last breath. And then Ari unfortunately collapsed and died. He has since become a national hero of the state of Israel. He left a very strong legacy, is I would say primary legacy, which again should not be such a novelty. It shouldn't be such a big deal, but here we are, is truth. He just had zero tolerance for the lies that the world tells, whether it's, pretending that a Palestinian state, an Arab Palestinian state ever existed in the history of the world. It did not. And when the world talks about Israel occupying Palestine, kindly tell me when this Palestine was established, what the national anthem was, what the currency was. It never existed. And so Ari didn't have tolerance for that. And he didn't have tolerance for people calling Judea and Samaria the West Bank. He corrected people and said, no, 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 it's called Judea and Samaria. And the fact that you don't want to call it that is because the word Judea kind of sounds like the word Jew, doesn't it? And so when you call it Judea, what you're admitting is that the Jews are indigenous to this land. And so that doesn't work with your agenda. So they call it the West Bank. So I try to, carry the torch forward and fight the lies and the historical fabrications perpetrated by the West. And ask myself on a regular basis, WWAD, what would Ari do?
Well, that is terrific. You are a loyal brother, and you definitely, the baton has been passed to you, and you've been carrying it successfully for several years. Tell me, what politically correct, elite, brainwashed group of individuals decided to revoke your visa to Australia when it had already been granted? It's not like it had been rejected. It had been
Right.
granted and then they revoked it.
Right. So I was flying to Australia on a Tuesday morning to speak at a gala for an organization called Magen David Adom, which is Israel's Red Cross. It's a life-saving organization in which Arabs and Jews work side by side. There's no politics involved in this organization. If anything, it's a peacemaking organization. And so I was not coming to Australia to speak about anything, controversial. I was supposed to fly out on a Tuesday morning. Friday, I got an email from the Australian government revoking my visa, saying that my tweets are Islamophobic. And the email included a PDF with some examples of my quote unquote Islamophobia, none of which was even remotely Islamophobic. For example, one of the tweets referred to an event that had just taken place the day before, where the media reported that there was a massacre in one of the humanitarian zones in Gaza. I knew for a fact from officials that not a single shot was fired by Israel. And so it was a complete blood libel, complete lie, fabrication. And so I tweeted and I said this did not happen. And so sure enough, the next day it was disproven, and everyone understands that it did not happen. That was one example. Another example is I spoke about the concept of Islamophobia. I said, listen, I'm the last person to ever encourage any sort of, racism or bigotry. But the word phobia has an actual meaning. It means the irrational fear of something. And when we're talking about a religion with 2 billion members, out of which 10 to 15% are radicalized, we're talking about hundreds of millions of people dedicated to my death, your death, and the destruction of the West. Fearing that is anything but irrational. And when you hear a Jew say Baruch Hashem, thank God, and you hear a Christian say praise the Lord, you smile. But when you hear a Muslim yell Allah Akbar, you run for your life. And so ask yourself why that is. Fearing a religion with hundreds of millions of members who commit terror globally, and here's the important part, in the name of their religion. We're not talking about some criminals or every single Islamist that committed a terrorist attack yelled Allah Akbar, meaning they're doing it in the name of Allah, they're doing it in the name of Islam. Fearing that religion is anything but irrational. So I basically said the word Islamophobia in and of itself is one big fabrication. Why don't we call it Jewphobia or Christian phobia? Why is Islam the only? So, again, I tweeted that and that was deemed racist in some way or another. And so they revoked my visa. I appealed immediately, of course, through the formal channels. I then went up the diplomatic ladder, and I spoke to Israel's foreign minister. I spoke to Mike Huckabee, Ambassador Mike Huckabee, and several other diplomats and politicians who all sent letters to the Australian government requesting for them to reverse their decision. The media reported it, hundreds of publications, and the decision was not reversed. And I am now banned from Australia for 3 years.
Oh my God. It's amazing how politically correct so-called hate speech seems to have a double standard. Folks can burn Israeli American flags, yell death to America, death to Israel, all over the planet. I don't think I've ever seen anybody banned for 3 years because they did that, but because of your harmless assertions, they ban you for 3 years. They revoke your visa that they had already given to you, and then
Yep.
they ban you for 3 years. That is disgraceful. And it also sadly overshadows, and you know this, and you live in Jerusalem?
I live in outskirts of Jerusalem.
Outskirts, okay. You know this very well that there is a very peaceful, integrated Arab-Israeli community in Israel that has been a part of Israel since its inception in 1948.
Yeah, they don't just exist. Israeli Arabs are part of every single component of Israeli society, including the parliament. We have this is crazy. We have actual anti-Zionist, meaning MKs that are in Israel's parliament that are against the state. Arabs who are anti-Israel as part of our parliament. We have Supreme Court justices who are Arabs. We have actors and lawyers and doctors. I mean, literally, you will find Arabs in every single part of Israeli society living with more freedom and more human rights than they have in any Islamic country in the Middle East. That's just a fact. Anybody who says otherwise is lying. And it's as simple as that. This isn't an opinion. It's a fact. There are millions of Arabs living in Israel freely with all the rights that Israelis have. And anything, other than that is just simply someone being dishonest.
Absolutely. And then speaking of the dishonesty, it's often Arab on Arab dishonesty. I had the privilege of meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu with my father. Actually, I was an aide to my father who had a meeting with the honor of a meeting with the Prime Minister for a few minutes. And I asked him, Mr. Prime Minister, you've got probably the freest, most successful Arab community throughout the Middle East. Why don't they, have an activist that speaks on their behalf, a spokesman on their behalf? And the Prime Minister bluntly said, because they would be killed, not by Jews or by Christians, but by their co-religionists, the radicals.
Yep. It's a terrible. You know what? I don't necessarily have claims against them because this is their, the theology, this is their doctrine, this is what they believe in. I have a problem with the West when millions of Muslims openly declare that they want to take over the West, imams throughout the West declaring exactly what they want. And then there's billions of Muslims who may be innocent, but they remain quiet. And so as far as I'm concerned, they're irrelevant. And yet the West refuses to see it, refuses to believe it when, again, these people are declaring it. They're not embarrassed. They're literally declaring we want to take over the West. And the West is like, yeah, they don't mean it. It's pure insanity. It's suicidal insanity. But this is the pattern. The same thing with the Palestinians, right? We call them, like I'm saying Palestinians, but let's be more accurate. They're Jordanians and Egyptians, but I'm calling them Palestinians. They declare, and when I say they, I don't mean Hamas. I mean literally the Palestinian Authority in their charter from day one declared not that they want a state. The Palestinians want a state. No, they don't. Read their charter. They don't want a state. They want dead Israelis, dead Jews. They want no Israel. That's what they said from day one. And so the irony, the double standard, it's so absurd. The paradox is you're saying, let's give these people a state when they themselves have never, ever said, we want a state alongside Israel. And so the West is saying, give them a state. They're saying, we don't want a state. The West is saying, they don't mean it. They don't mean it. Give them a state. We don't want a state. They don't mean it. Are they children or are they adults? If they're children who should not be held accountable for their words, then why do you want to give them a state? And if they're adults who deserve a state, then they should be held accountable for their words and their actions. They should be held accountable for the fact that the Palestinian Authority, not Hamas, the Palestinian Authority has a pay to slay, has a program where they pay terrorists. How much do they pay them? The more Jews they kill, the more money they pay them. This is a real thing. This is a fact. This is indisputable. And yet the world says, "Oh yeah, they're peace loving, moderates." No, they're not. They're Hamas with a suit and tie. That's what they are.
They view the Palestinian with glasses of what they hope they will be as opposed to who they actually are. Well, Hillel, let's transition to your entrepreneurism because that actually has a connection to what we've been talking about in that the in the tech industry, you have these, and you've been a part of this bridge building between the tech community of the United States, the tech community of Israel, and that has financial, that has national security, that has military ramifications. So I was hoping that you can talk about that a bit.
Sure. So Israel, as you may or may not know, I mean, you know this, but is a country smaller than New Jersey, right? This is a country that you could barely even see on the map. It's tiny, and it's, in the worst neighborhood on Earth, right? The most unstable region on planet Earth. Despite that, despite all the regional challenges, and despite the fact that Israel's basically fighting an existential war since its inception, Israel leads the world in innovation across all sectors with no signs of slowing down. If you look at the amount of capital flowing into Israel, we're talking billions and billions of dollars, and the numbers are just increasing. If you look at some of the success stories in this war alone, Google made their biggest acquisition in its history, $32 billion for an Israeli company called Wiz. Apple made their second acquisition of founders that originally invented Face ID. When you use your phone and you unlock your phone, that was invented by an Israeli. The company was called PrimeSense. Apple acquired them and then implemented it in their iPhone. And now Apple acquired the company by the same founders, their second company. So Apple's making acquisitions, Nvidia's making acquisitions. If you look at the most valuable companies in the world, right? You got Nvidia that just tripled their presence in Israel and are more Zionist than me and you put together times 10. Then the second one is Apple, that the chip of the iPhone is built in Herzliya in Israel. And like I said, Face ID was developed by an Israeli. They have massive offices in Israel and, thousands of employees here. The third one is Google. Again, tons of offices in Israel, made, many, many acquisitions, not only Wiz, but we know Waze and other things. So they're number three. And then you look at Amazon, who, the drone delivery department of Amazon was started and invented by an Israeli named Menashe. And the list just goes on. I mean, you look at Meta, Facebook is all over Israel. So you look at the most valuable companies in the world, they're all super duper Zionist, right? So there's something really magical happening in the Israeli tech ecosystem. We're seeing incredible levels of success. And like I said, we break records. The world says that they can't possibly sustain that. And then the next quarter comes and we break another record. And that did not change during the war. Despite the fact that Israel's fighting an existential war on 7 fronts, we're continuing to break records. We broke records in M&A, mergers and acquisitions. We broke records in large strategic rounds of financing through the war. Israel shows no signs of slowing down, and that is nothing short of miraculous.
Well, you guys didn't even slow down during COVID. In fact, you are a critical part of testing in the biotech industry or community, rather, to come up with a solution to COVID, to find out what COVID is real, what COVID is not real. So, yeah, I'm very, very aware of your advancements. What do you see as the future of partnership and codependency between the tech community of the United States and Israel?
It's a fantastic question, and it's a hot topic and a controversial topic, I should say, because right now, obviously, the White House are our friends and our best friend we've ever had in the White House. No one's debating that. But
In
the
fact,
way I see
I
the
think President Trump is even more popular than the current prime minister in Israel,
yeah,
and
that's pretty
probably more
accurate.
popular than he is here in the United States.
That's right. I think, if I had to give an analogy describing the relationship between the U.S. and Israel, I would call it an abusive relationship. I would say that, right now, again, the abusive husband's being very nice to us, and we appreciate that. But, last year, last presidency, we were a battered wife, a battered spouse, right? And we know how it goes, right? I mean, Obama was just full blown, anti-Israel. There's no question about that. Biden was not much better, and if Kamala had won, we would have been in big trouble. So it's right now, and we're in good territory, but we can't continue to be dependent on a foreign government, and we know that because we can read history books. And when the Jews are dependent on a foreign government, it does not end well for us. And so, again, I could speak for myself, obviously very grateful to the United States of America as someone who grew up there and whose grandparents left the Holocaust, left Germany, and found, refuge in the United States of America. I have a ton of gratitude, right? But it's not a sustainable thing. And I think that Israel knows this, Netanyahu knows this, and a lot is happening in terms of, defense tech being sold to other countries, and Israel slowly becoming financially independent. And I believe that that's one of the top priorities. Not to say that the friendship between the United States and Israel is going to end. Hopefully we'll always remain allies, but I am highly uncomfortable with the fact that Israel depends. And when I say depends, people have to understand, like, every Iron Dome missile that we fire that saves millions of Israelis' lives costs $100,000, each one of them. We've fired tens of thousands, if not more, throughout this war. So it's big money. And so, the United States foreign aid to Israel is extremely important to us. But it's unsustainable, and I think we need to break up. We need to get out of this abusive relationship.
What role will the historic Abraham Accords play in getting Israel more independence, if you will? Should that get back on track and fast forward to eventually include Saudi Arabia and other Arab nations?
Yeah, so I think that Abraham Accords, as far as I'm concerned, are a sign of messianic times. I believe, like, this is unbelievable stuff. I was in Dubai last month. I mean, I felt safer in Dubai than I feel in New York. It's crazy. I mean, people ask me where I'm from. If I'm in New York, I'd be like, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say it. Dubai, everyone's like, oh, we love Tel Aviv. Like, it's literal messianic times. There's real peace here. It's unbelievable. And, we see trade between the UAE and Israel and Bahrain and Israel and other things. And I think it's massive. I think it's monumental. I hope they do get expanded. There's a lot of talk about expanding to other countries, and I do believe that that will happen, hopefully sooner than later. But yeah, it is extremely significant, extremely significant.
Excellent. Well, as we close this interview, and this has been, I've got to tell you, and I'm not just floating your ego here. This is one of the best interviews that we've had on
Wow, thank
TV
you.
Abraham. And let me just ask you, I guess, a semi non-political tech question, which is AI. I have an expectation that I know where you stand on this question, but I got to ask it anyway. Where do you stand on AI 50 years from now? Will AI have replaced humanity, or will it have given humanity a bridge to the future?
Do you know what happened when the tractor was invented?
I,
Farmers freaked out.
I can
Do
imagine.
you know what happened when the internet was invented? Encyclopedia companies freaked out. You know what happened when the printer was invented? The printing industry freaked out. When new technology comes out, we tend to freak out. We don't like change, and I get that. And AI is no different. Will certain jobs be replaced by AI? Absolutely. Is that a bad thing? I don't think that's a bad thing. I think if you're a human being who sits by a keyboard all day long and does data entry like a robot, you deserve to be replaced by AI. And I think that that will push us to, greater heights and to do more things that human beings should do that cannot be replaced by AI, such as creativity. But if you're so easily replaced by AI, then perhaps you deserve to be replaced by AI. So I think, all in all, AI is going to be net positive for humanity, like the internet was and many inventions before it. That being said, there's no question, like the internet, that it will bring negative things, and it will bring dangers, and regulation is going to have to be a part of this equation. But again, all in all, I think AI is going to be an incredible utility, and it's going to be net positive for us. And I think people don't realize. I don't think people understand the enormity of this concept of AI, because people talk about an AI agent being smarter than a human being. AI is not smarter than a human being. AI is smarter than humanity.
Hmm.
You have to understand, as we get older, our brain becomes less sharp, right? You get quote unquote dumber. As AI gets older, it gets smarter. So imagine, the delta and how that's going to change. And so in a matter of not 50 years, in a matter of 5 years from now, AI is going to be smarter than all of humanity, period. Now, again, what does that mean for us? It means we're going to have to adapt, and we're going to have to do things that computers can't do until they learn how to do that too, and then we have to adapt again. But this is not something new. Again, this is something that we see as a pattern. When new things come out, people are scared, and I understand that. I get it. But all in all, AI is going to enhance our lives. I have no question.
Excellent. This is a silly question. There's not going to be a Terminator future where AI says that humanity is obsolete. It can't keep up with us. It should be eliminated.
I don't think it's a silly question at all. I think it's a pretty realistic scenario if we don't put the controls in place. In other words, if we don't have regulation, because right now, I don't need to tell you this. Anybody could take a picture of a person and post it on the internet, completely fake, and damn ruin lives. That can't continue. That we have to have some sort of regulation against this stuff. And so, if we put regulation and we put controls in place that won't allow complete freedom to AI, then I'm not too concerned. But if we don't, and we let it go run wild like the Wild West, like it is right now, yeah, there are some serious fears and I don't think it's a silly question at all.
Well, I want to thank you, Hillel Fuld, for being my guest today. This was a fascinating interview. We covered a
Thank you.
lot of topics together. If folk want to follow Israel's top tech blogger, and activist, where do they go?
Well, I'm on all platforms. My normal screen name is Hills Fuld. Like instead of my name Hillel Fuld, Hills Fuld. So it's Hilz like zebra with my last name Hills Fuld. So I would say I'm most active on Twitter. Facebook is my biggest platform in terms of just like following, but really you can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, wherever you want. I'm everywhere.
Fantastic. Well, you have to promise, should I make it to Jerusalem or Israel, which I do intend to do, that you'll have me on as a guest on one of your podcasts or broadcasts, and we go out get a cup of coffee, a cup of tea together.
Done.
Okay, sounds good. Well, Fuld, thank you so much for being a guest on the show, and we're going to end it as we always do with the words of my father, who was a civil rights icon, Roy Innis. Your father probably knew him in New York. And he always says, Nigel, live your life with TLC. And I don't mean tender love and care, even though I'll give you plenty of that. I mean truth, logic, and courage.
Amen.
Thank you again, folks. And thank you for another edition of Niger Innis Presents The Trump Revolution, a part of the TV Abraham Network. God bless.